Shalom Aleichem, Mishpachah. Welcome to our Matthew lesson tonight. We're continuing in the book of Matthew, and tonight we'll be studying chapter 8. All of the scriptures are from the Tree of Life version of the Bible. And we continue to study Matthew as a thoroughly Jewish book, or as a scroll, as it would have been when it was originally written. So logically, we could call it the Megillah of Matityahu, the scroll of Matthew. And it was Yeshua's disciple Matthew's account of the events which took place during his walk with him, from his calling at the tax booth near Capernaum to Yeshua's ascension to the Father on the Mount of Olives, 40 days after his death on the stake. Yeshua's message on the mountain ended when he came down from the mountain. Large crowds followed him. And as we said earlier, there was quite a crowd which gathered around to listen to Yeshua on the mountain. And it seems now that he had finished his message, that many of them were following him when he left there. We have visited one of the traditional sites for Yeshua's sermon in Israel several times. And the one we visited may be even the leading contender for the location. There are several different locations that they say may be where it happened. But this particular one is not really a mountain, but a small hill rising up from the Sea of Galilee. And the top of it, if you keep on going beyond where we were, is about 575 feet in elevation above the lake. But it does have amazing sound properties. You can stand down near the lake and you can speak facing the hill and be clearly heard far up it. And we can compare it. The area has the sound qualities and properties of the amphitheaters in Israel that were constructed by the Romans. When we visited amphitheaters in Israel, we would always go down to the stage, and then we would speak normally, and we would be heard high up in the seats. And some of these amphitheaters would hold thousands of people. But when Yeshua left the mountain, according to what we're going to read in a few minutes, it seems that he was headed toward Capernaum. He would have been walking north, and it's probably a little less than a mile away as the crow flies. And a man from Zarot came to him and bowed down before him, saying, "Master, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Yeshua stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, "I am willing, be cleansed." Immediately his sorrow was cleansed. And Yeshua said to him, "See that you tell no one, but go show yourself to the Kohen and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them." So if we retell the story just a little bit, as Yeshua was walking, a man with leprosy, a form of skin disease, but not the modern leprosy, which we know today, the one which is caused by the bacteria, Mycobacterium leprae, not that leprosy. This man approached him and asked that he be made clean. The Greek word used here is kapharizo, and it means to cleanse or to make clean. And literally, if you take it a little bit beyond that, it means to take away any unclean thing. Then Yeshua touched the man and spoke the words, "Be katharizo," be cleansed. But he didn't say it in Greek. It most likely would have been in Aramaic. And then the man was clean. Yeshua then said, "Don't tell anyone, but present yourself to the Kohanim, to the priests, so that they can see with their own eyes that you are clean, that you are healed. And then offer the gift, the doron, the sacrifice commanded by Moses." And according to Torah, they had to see that he was clean in order to be able to accept his gift. Much is made of Yeshua fulfilling the Torah so that his followers that day and us today would not have to follow Torah. But we don't believe that's true. We continue to follow Torah today when it is possible. In this case, the man with Zarat was instructed to follow Torah. And Leviticus 14, 1 through 32 tells how he was to do it. We'll read just a little bit of it. Then Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, "This is the Torah of the one with Zarat, and the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the Kohen, and the Kohen is to go to the outside of the camp. The Kohen is to examine him, and behold, if the mark of Zarat is healed in one with Zarat, then the Kohen is to command that 2 clean living birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop be brought for the one being cleansed." And then it goes on to tell how they were to do that. You can read these verses to find out yourself. But the point is that he was instructed to go and follow the Torah of Moses. Today, these particular commands in Leviticus are presently inactive. Even if we were to contract biblical leprosy, we have no Levitical priesthood which can officiate these events, and so this Torah is inactive for us. Now, when Yeshua came into Capernaum, a centurion came begging for help. "Master," he said, "my servant is lying at home, paralyzed, horribly tormented." Yeshua said to him, "I'll come and heal him." But the centurion said, "Master, I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I say to this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." Now when Yeshua heard this, he marveled and said to those who were following, "Amen, I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith." This man knew what authority was. A centurion, a Roman army officer, was in command of a group called a century. And it was made up of about 80 men, not 100 men, because century here does not derive from 100, but from a word which means company. And the centurion was equivalent in rank to today's army captain, who also commands a company. That Yeshua had not found anyone in Israel to this point, any Jew with that great faith, is surprising though, if we stop and think about it. It seems to us that Yeshua had just commenced his ministry because he gave the Sermon on the Mount and now he was going up to Capernaum. But quite a lot had happened if we go back and look at chapter 4. Yeshua was going throughout all the Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every kind of disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread throughout all Syria, and they brought to him all the sick, those tormented by various diseases and afflictions, those plagued by demons, the epileptics, the paralyzed, and he healed them. So what we see here is that Yeshua had possibly healed thousands of people before encountering the centurion. He had already been throughout all of Galilee teaching and healing in the synagogues, and he even healed many Syrians, that is, Gentiles. But the faith of this Roman Gentile was greater than any which he had encountered, even among his own people. As we said, this centurion had authority over 80 men, and he could tell them to go here or go there or lift this or drag that, and he understood how authority worked. It is amazing that his faith was so great that he knew that all Yeshua had to do was speak the word to say, "Be healed," and his servant would be healed. Yeshua's next words apply to those who have similar faith. He said, "Moreover, I tell you that many will come from the east and the west, and they will recline at table with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom will be driven out into the outer darkness, and that place will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Yeshua was proclaiming that what he was offering was indeed open to Gentiles, and that many Gentiles after their death would be in heaven with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But what we really need to understand here is that this was not an exclusion of the sons of the kingdom, as some people interpreted. This was a comparative statement relating this Gentile's faith to the faith of the sons of Israel, which he had encountered thus far. He'd not found any with faith that great. Then Yeshua said to the centurion, "Go, as you have, be it done for you." And the servant was healed in that same hour. And when Yeshua came into Peter's house, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying down, sick with a fever. Yeshua touched her hand, and the fever left her. Then she got up and began to take care of him. So after Yeshua left the centurion, he continued to the home of Shimon Kephah. His home was found by archaeologists about 25 years ago, and it is located about 30 yards east of the synagogue in Capernaum. The present synagogue in Capernaum was constructed on the one built in the 1st century, but it was built hundreds of years later. The archaeologists who were digging found Peter's house underneath an octagonal church, which had been built over it by the Byzantine Christians about 1800 years ago. It seems that any time some Christians found something that related to Yeshua's day, they wanted to build something on it. And so they built this church over Peter's house. What they found, Peter's house, was slightly larger than most of the houses of that period. Maybe he was pretty wealthy fisherman before he was called by Yeshua. But it was a very simple house. It had a roof of earth and straw. Also had a few small rooms around 2 open courtyards. And Yeshua entered the house, and it was there that he found Peter's mother-in-law ill and with a fever. After he touched her hand, the fever left, and she got up and began attending to him. Such things as washing his feet or whatever else the custom to welcome guests would have included. When evening came, the people brought to him many who were afflicted by demons. He forced out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. So was fulfilled what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet, saying, He himself took our sicknesses and carried away our diseases. Whenever the sick came to him, Yeshua's compassion always caused him to heal them. And we see here in what we just read that Matthew quoted Isaiah as a fulfillment of prophecy. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our pains. If we read Mark, we find another encounter with the sick. When a sick man was let down through the roof because he could not get in the door because of the crowds. If you read it carefully, this does not appear to be a parallel with this event in Matthew. It's a little different story where he came from and where he went afterwards. But what the point I was wanting to make is that in Mark, the word keramos, rendered as tiles in the Tree of Life version and other Bibles, can also be singular and just mean roof. And so, since the roof of the first century house, which was discovered, was of straw, it would have been easy to open a hole in it and lower this sick man down in the Mark 2 story. Now, when Yeshua saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to go to the other side of the sea. Then a Torah scholar came to him and said, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. Yeshua tells him, Foxes have dens and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Then another of the disciples said, Master, first let me go and bury my father. But Yeshua tells him, Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. I think that the words which say when Yeshua saw a crowd around him, they don't fully explain why he decided to leave. I don't think he would necessarily leave just because there was a crowd around him. I was thinking that perhaps it was because all of them there had already been healed. Or maybe it was to prompt those 2 men to follow him and to ask their questions. Perhaps he knew what was in their mind and he got up and left so that they could follow him and ask the questions. The first one, the Torah scholar, called a scribe in other Bible versions, was a Pharisee. When he said, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go, he was essentially asking if he could become a disciple along with the others. And I don't think that Yeshua necessarily refused him to be a disciple. He just merely stated the situation of the first century itinerant rabbi. They traveled all about, accompanied with their disciples, and they found lodging wherever they could. When in Capernaum, Yeshua had a home at Peter's house, but he wasn't there very often. As we read in Matthew 4, They traveled all over Galilee, and this is really what Yeshua was talking about. So I think it's entirely possible that the Torah scholar may have joined him. And then verse 21 tells about one of his disciples. This was one who was already following him, and he seemed to have a change of mind. He was doing what we might call down here in South Georgia, begging off. He didn't seem to want to follow Yeshua all over Israel. The problem wasn't that his father had just died and he had to go and bury him, but it was that he was old and the man wanted to stay with him until he died. I don't think that Yeshua's response was unsympathetic, but it was urgent. He knew the time frame required for his ministry, and only those totally committed were accepted into his ministry. So let the dead bury the dead was a reference to the spiritually dead, those who remained at home who had not taken up Yeshua's call to follow me. And we don't know what the disciples' response was, whether he continued to follow or he went back home to his father. As he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. Suddenly a great storm arose on the sea, so that the boat was being covered by the waves. But Yeshua kept on sleeping. So they came and woke him up, saying, "Master, save us, we are perishing." He said to them, "Why are you afraid, O you of little faith?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and it became totally calm. The men were amazed, saying, "What kind of person is this? Even the winds and the sea obey him." Well, it was just a few hundred yards from Kepha's house to the lake. That is, if they got in the boat there, which they probably did. The distance to the south end of the lake at Gadara was about 10 miles, almost due south from Capernaum, and it would have been a journey of possibly 2.5 hours by sail and rowing. But here, just as with the location of the Sermon on the Mount, the location of Gadara is not certain. The other possible site is almost directly across the lake to the east near Hippos. If he were going to Hippos, it would have been a shorter journey there, possibly an hour and a half. They left early in the evening and the weather was clear. But on their way, a storm suddenly arose with large waves. It's been suggested that with Yeshua and his disciples in the boat, along with 2 crewmen to operate it, the weight of 15 men in one of those types of fishing boats of that day would cause the boat to sink down into water to the point that there only would have been about 1 foot of freeboard between the water and the top of the gunnels. If that was true, it would mean that water could have already been coming into the boat from the crashing of the 1 to 2 foot waves. Now it's very interesting. The crashing waves of the storm didn't wake Yeshua. He was sleeping peacefully. But here again, it's amazing that his disciples had so little faith. Most of them had been with him. They had seen him heal thousands from all kinds of diseases. They'd seen him cast out demons. But yet, they did not recognize his great power. This kind of made me think of Israel in the wilderness after seeing the many miracles of Adonai. They saw Adonai do these miracles, and yet still they had no faith. What we see here is that Yeshua's actual disciples, the ones that he called to walk with him, didn't even have the faith of the centurion. And even after Yeshua calmed the storm, they were incredulous. What kind of a man is this? They've seen him do all these miracles. What we see is that this pattern would continue even until Yeshua died on the stake. They knew, yet they didn't know. When he came to the other side, into the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-plagued men coming from the graveyard met him. They were so violent that no one could pass by that way. And they screamed, "What's between you and us, Ben Elohim? Have you come here to torment us before the appointed time?" Now a large herd of pigs was feeding some distance away from them. The demons kept begging him, "If you drive us out, send us into that herd of pigs." And he told them, "Go." So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the cliff into the sea and drowned. The herdsman ran away, went into town, and told everything, including what had happened to the demon-plagued men. The whole town came out to meet Yeshua, and when they saw him, they begged him to leave their region. I think because it says the other side here, the site near Hippus directly across the lake might be the best choice. In Matthew's version, we find 2 demon-possessed men, while in Mark's and Luke's, there is only one. But it's clear that each one of these versions is discussing the same incident because of the calming of the storm and casting out demons into pigs at Gadara. We don't know why Mark and Luke only mentioned one man while Yeshua says there were 2. But while Matthew says there were 2, excuse me. But there seems to be no contradiction here, because Mark and Luke did not say that there was only one man. As soon as Yeshua got out of the boat, a man from the graveyard with an unclean spirit met him. That's in Mark. Then in Luke, they sailed over to the country of the Gerasenes, which is on the opposite side of the Galilee. A demon-plagued man from the town met Yeshua as he was coming out onto the land. Why they didn't tell more about the other man is unknown, but there's no contradiction here. They didn't say that there was only one. And I think that Luke's version here also lends credence to the location being near Hippos on the eastern shore of the lake, because he said that it is on the opposite side of the Galilee. What we see here as Yeshua approached these men is that the demons in them recognize Yeshua as Ben Elohim, the Son of God. As demons, strange to say, but they were very familiar with him. And they also knew about the coming day when they would be judged, and which they called the appointed time in this version. The reason that they asked Yeshua to send them into the herd of pigs was so that he would not send them into the abyss. Luke 8:31 in that story tells that they implored him not to send them into the abyss. What is the abyss? It was the underworld. It was a bottomless space somewhere to which demons, the fallen angels, were to eventually go. And some of them were already there. And the angels who did not keep their own position of authority but deserted their proper place, he has kept in everlasting shackles under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. And that is from Yehuda in the book Judah, verse 6, Yeshua's brother. Shimon Kephah also refers to these angels. For God did not spare angels when they sinned, but threw them into Sheol. He put them in chains of gloomy darkness to be held until the judgment. So we see that Sheol is another name for the abyss. And Yeshua could have sent these demons into Sheol just as those spoken of by Yehuda and Kephah had been sent. But he didn't send them there. He allowed them, they didn't die when the pigs went in the water. He allowed them to continue to wander the earth seeking men to inhabit. Wonder why he did that. When you think about it, having demons seeking people to inhabit is no different than living in a forest full of grizzly bears. You can learn to avoid them. And you can also avoid demons, or you can get rid of them if you have them. So we don't know why Yeshua allowed them to stay, but very likely they went around seeking some other person to inhabit. What this encounter of Yeshua shows us, and all of the other encounters in which he cast out demons, is that demons are real. They're here today, and they can inhabit human beings. They somehow seem to be attracted to sin, and those who continually sin seem to be more likely to have them. In most cases, the people who have a demon or a few demons are in a condition described as demon obsessed. This means that the demons don't control you, but they can and do strongly influence some of your actions. I personally can testify that they're real. Years ago, I had multiple demons. I don't remember how many now. And they influenced my actions and even brought me almost to the point of being demon-possessed. I guess you would say I was sinning a lot. But it was only by the grace of God that I was able to have enough control to break free and to drive for 3 hours to a pastor friend who cast them all out. I don't remember how many, but it was more than a few. Those who are demon-possessed are actually controlled by demons, just as those two men at Gadara were. In Mark chapter 5, verse 9, Yeshua asked the demon-possessed man his name. You remember what he said? Legion, for we are many. If you look at the Roman legion, there were 4,000 to 6,000 soldiers in a Roman army legion. I would say probably there were not that many demons in this man, but that it was a symbolic number signifying many, many demons. In the Tanakh, demons are referred to as shadim. They are not shown to inhabit people as such in the Tanakh, but they are the underlying spirits of idols and false gods. Referring to the people of Israel, Psalm 106 says, they even sacrificed their sons and their daughters to demons. And this was particularly true with the worship of the Canaanite god Molech. Even after the Holy Temple was built, the Judeans sacrificed their children to a goat demon in the Hinnom Valley just outside Jerusalem. while others were worshiping, and maybe these same people also worshiped in the temple as well. They were just covering all their bases. This was the place outside Jerusalem, the Hinnom Valley, which Yeshua later referred to as Gehenna, the place of the dead. He used it as an example because it was a burning trash dump, and there was fire and smoke there constantly. Apparently, even in the wilderness after leaving Egypt, Israel was still sacrificing to goat demons. But once the tabernacle was constructed, Adonai commanded against it. They are no longer to offer their sacrifices to the goat demons after which they play the prostitute. This will be a statute forever to them throughout their generations. So we see that there are fallen angels and demons attested to by both the Tanakh and the writings of Yeshua Shlichim, the Brit Hadashah. It's something that's going on today, and it's something that can be dealt with by using Yeshua's name and his blood. And many find the solution to their problems and are healed by having the demons cast out of them. The whole town came out to meet Yeshua, and when they saw him, they begged him to leave their region. All of the people wanted to see the one who had just restored these two wild men, but they apparently weren't happy that he had caused a whole herd of pigs to be killed. If he had stayed around much longer, he would have wrecked their economy. What we see here is that in Gadara, no one else was delivered from demons. No one was healed of diseases, and no one asked to follow Yeshua. So he left. During Yeshua's 3+ years of ministry in Israel, he healed some Gentiles, but his primary purpose was there to train disciples. You remember when a Canaanite woman asked for healing for her daughter who had a demon, Yeshua initially resisted, but then he relented and he healed her. But during this encounter, he said, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." With regard to Gentiles, we've seen in this chapter that Yeshua healed some Syrians, and he healed 2 Gadarene men. But he was sent by Adonai to Israel to call disciples and to prepare them to take his message to the whole world. In Matthew 28, shortly before he ascended to his Father, Yeshua said, "Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, immersing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Ruach HaKodesh, teaching them to observe all I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." We today, the disciples of the disciples of the disciples of the disciples, etc., are now at the end of that age, and Yeshua is with us. His Holy Spirit inhabits us and guides us into all righteousness. That is, if we listen. Shalom Aleichem.